Imagine being told that the very skin you live in isn't enough. That your voice, your clothes, and even the way you carry yourself somehow disqualify you from belonging. This isn't the cruelty of strangers. It comes from the very people who should understand you most. For one teenager, the whispers started small, almost like jokes, but every word cut deeper. And when the world around him began echoing the same message, that he wasn't black enough, he faced a painful question that could shatter anyone's identity. If you're not enough for your own community, then where do you truly belong? Jaden had always been caught between two worlds. At 17, he wasn't the loudest in the room, nor the one trying hardest to stand out. He loved reading, sketching in his notebook, and listening to music that didn't always match what others expected from him. In school, his grades were strong, his teachers respected him, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Yet, behind that confidence, cracks were beginning to form, cracks carved not by enemies, but by his own peers. It started in small ways, a comment about his voice being too proper, a laugh about his choice of sneakers, a smirk when he didn't know. The lyrics to the newest song everyone else was singing. To Jaden, these seemed harmless at first, just playful teasing. But repetition turns whispers into weapons. Soon, every room he walked into reminded him he didn't quite measure up to the unwritten rules of his own identity. At home, he hoped for relief. But even there, subtle remarks slipped through the cracks of family conversations. A cousin joked that he was soft. An uncle suggested he needed to toughen up. They thought they were teasing, but Jaden heard confirmation of what school had already taught him. No matter where he stood, he was on the outside, and while others his age worried about fitting in with strangers, Jaden faced something far more isolating, the feeling of not fitting in with his own people. The more Jaden tried to ignore the comments, the heavier they became. They followed him in the hallways, clung to him at family gatherings, and echoed in his own mind when he was alone. Each remark sharpened the same blade. You're not one of us. At school, the divide was sharpest. Jaden's circle of friends included kids from all backgrounds. He never thought twice about it until others did. Walking into the cafeteria, he could feel eyes tracing where he sat. A group of boys from his neighborhood watched him laugh with a white friend and muttered, under their breath. He could sense their judgment even without hearing the words. He wasn't betraying anyone. He wasn't choosing sides. But in their eyes, he was crossing a line that shouldn't exist. The weight grew heavier during class discussions. Whenever Jaden answered with confidence, the praise from teachers was met with rolled eyes from classmates. They saw proper speech as a mask, a betrayal of authenticity. But to Jaden, it was simply who he was. Every time he raised his hand, he faced a choice. Shrink back to blend in, or speak and risk being labeled again. Over time, silence felt safer, but it also left him feeling smaller, invisible. Home was supposed to be different, but it wasn't. At a family barbecue, the jokes stung sharper. A cousin laughed that Jaden acted too white to understand what they were talking about. Laughter erupted, but Jaden didn't. He sat in silence, feeling the sting of rejection from the very people he trusted most. The same voices that should have lifted him up made him question the ground beneath his feet. Late at night, he replayed it all. The teasing, the smirks, the whispers. Alone in his room, his reflection became an enemy. He would stare into the mirror and ask questions he couldn't answer. Am I pretending? Am I not enough? Am I a stranger in my own skin? What made it worse was the silence of those who could have defended him. Teachers brushed off the jokes as harmless. Family members laughed along. Friends stayed quiet. And in that silence, Jaden learned a painful lesson, that the world's cruelest words aren't always shouted by enemies but whispered by the people closest to you. The cracks in his identity widened. The boy who once carried quiet confidence now carried quiet doubt. And while no one else could see it, Jaden was drowning under the weight of belonging nowhere. One evening, The weight became unbearable. Jaden sat at his desk, notebook open, pen in hand. Instead of his usual sketches, the page was filled with words, fragments of every label he'd been given. Too soft, too proper, not real, not black enough. Each word scratched across the page like a scar. His chest felt heavy. He tore the paper out, crumpled it, and threw it aside, but the words clung to him even louder in his mind. He gripped the pen until his knuckles whitened, and with a surge of anger he pressed harder, writing the same question over and over until the ink nearly tore through the paper. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? The room was silent except for the sound of his pen scratching furiously. His heart raced as if trying to answer a question with no end. Tears blurred the page. For the first time, he admitted a truth he had buried for too long. He was exhausted, not from strangers' hate, but from his own people's judgment. He looked at himself in the mirror across the room, eyes swollen, face streaked with tears. The reflection staring back felt like a stranger. Every memory of being laughed at, dismissed, and mocked for not fitting an impossible mold rushed back in a flood that threatened to drown him. And in that breaking moment, Jaden realized the most dangerous kind of racism wasn't only the kind that came from outside. It was the kind that forced him to doubt his own existence, to strip away his own identity piece by piece. The silence was deafening. His breathing was shallow. For a split second, it felt like he had nothing left, like he could disappear and the world wouldn't notice. But in the middle of that storm, something inside him refused to break. Jaden didn't sleep that night. But as dawn pushed through his window, something shifted. He was tired, not of being mocked, but of apologizing for simply existing. The weight of every whispered insult still sat heavy on his shoulders, but beneath it, a quiet truth began to rise. He wasn't broken. He wasn't lacking. He wasn't not enough. He had been made to believe a lie. The next day, he walked into school carrying the same notebooks, wearing the same clothes, and speaking in the same voice. But this time, he carried himself differently. When the stares came, he didn't shrink. When the snickers followed, he didn't falter. And when someone muttered the familiar phrase, "You're not really black," Jaden stopped. He turned, and though he said nothing, his silence spoke louder than their words. He wasn't going to defend his identity anymore. He didn't need to. Over time, Jaden learned that belonging isn't earned through meeting someone else's checklist of what you should sound like, look like, or enjoy. Belonging comes from refusing to let stereotypes define you. And while the comments didn't disappear overnight, the power they once had over him did. Because the truth is, racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers through jokes, through labels, through the sting of not enough. And when those whispers come from within your own community, the wound cuts deeper than most people can imagine. But Jaden's story carries a lesson for anyone who has ever been told they don't belong. You do not need to perform your identity to be valid. You don't need to prove yourself to fit someone else's narrow view of who you should be. So the next time you hear someone being told they're not enough of anything, remember this. Identity is not a performance. It's a truth you carry, whether the world accepts it or not. And maybe the question isn't whether Jaden was black enough. Maybe the real question is, why do we keep trying to measure someone's worth at all?